A solid is one in which its structure is highly rigid, and the molecules are tightly packed and vibrating. When the molecules are arranged in a regular orderly pattern, they are known as crystals. However, when they're not known as crystals, and they constantly vibrate as they have thermal energy. They share many qualities and characteristics with other solids, such as elasticity. Elasticity is when a force is applied upon an object, and the object goes back to its original state. Plasticity is another characteristic which solids hold, as if the force is under what we call the yield value of an object, then it goes back to its solid state. Otherwise, it is changed if the stressor force is higher than the yield value. Melting is the transition from a solid to a liquid when the internal energy of the substance is increased through the heat application or the pressure, which causes the temperature of the substance to increase to what we call the melting point, where the ionic or the molecular parts of the solid break down to a less ordered state. A liquid is a material made up of more tiny vibrating particles of matter, for example atoms and molecules, which are all held together by intramolecular bonds. A liquid is able to take many different shapes and the shape of a container. Another distinctive property is its surface tension, which causes things to become wet. Surface tension allows the liquid to resist by external forces. One of the most abundant sources of liquid on the Earth is water. It covers about 70% of the Earth's surface. Evaporation is when a liquid changes into a gas. However, when a solid changes directly into gas, it is called sublimation. Evaporation is when a liquid is vaporized from boiling, which occurs throughout the whole liquid and happens with the vapor phase or the gaseous phase, and a liquid is produced. At the boiling point, the molecules collide as they transfer energy to each other in many different degrees depending on their collision. The transfer can be one-sided, but either way they evaporate due to this. In gas, the molecules move around very freely and they conform to the shape of their container, and their particles are widely separated from each other. They have very weak intermolecular forces, unlike liquids and solids, and the pressure and the temperature influence gas in a certain volume. The gaseous compounds with polar covalent bonds have permanent charge imbalances, therefore they would have stronger intermolecular forces, and the randomly induced charges exist throughout the non-polar covalent bonds of the molecules, but the electrostatic interactions are called the van der Waal forces. Plasma is the fourth state of matter, and it is created by adding energy to a gas, causing its atoms and molecules to separate. This is called ionization into negatively charged electrons and positively charged ions, which react strongly to the electromagnetic fields. If the plasma cools down, it will form back into a gas. Plasma reaches extremely high temperatures as they constitute the stars which we see in the sky, and they can instantly vaporize anything. This shows the ionization in plasma, as the very small particles which are flying away from the larger particles are the electrons which are being transferred all across. Another good image of this would show exactly what's going on in a stationary way. Most liquids freeze by crystallization. Freezing is the phenomenon when a liquid changes from a liquid to a solid. The molecules start gathering into clusters, causing the liquid to change into the solid. This is the opposite of melting. The most common example here, water to ice. There are some liquids, however, that cannot be frozen into a solid, like liquid helium. However, every other known liquid can be frozen. Condensation is the opposite of evaporation. This usually happens when it rains in the sky, as the gas becomes into liquid and it falls down upon us. Condensation usually happens when it's compressed to its saturation limit and the density reaches its complete maximum. Sublimation is when a solid directly changes into a gas. A major example is dry ice, where it is just frozen carbon dioxide going back to its gas form. This is due to pressure, and only some elements can do this. These elements include diamond and iodine. Deposition is the opposite of sublimation. It is when a gas changes into a solid. This happens when frost is formed in the air and falls to the ground. This happens because thermal energy is taken away from the gas, and this is easy for water vapor as it's very pure and energy is lost very quickly.